5. The Horde of Angry Sorcerers. We were in the town at the crack of dawn. At that point I took the wheel and drove toward the house. A couple of blocks before we got there, La Gorda asked me to stop. She got out of the car and began to walk on the high sidewalk. One by one, all of them got out. They followed La Gorda. Pablito came to my side and said that I should park on the plaza, which was a block away. I did that. The moment I saw La Gorda turning the corner, I knew that something was wrong with her. She was extraordinarily pale. She came to me and said in a whisper that she was going to go to hear early mass. Lydia also wanted to do that. Both of them walked across the plaza and went inside the church. Pablito, Nestor, and Benigno were as somber as I had ever seen them. Rosa was frightened, her mouth open, her eyes fixed, unblinking, looking in the direction of the house. Only Josefina was beaming. She gave me a buddy-buddy slap on the back. "You've done it, you son of a gun!" she exclaimed. "You've knocked the tar out of these sons of bitches." She laughed until she was nearly out of breath. "Is this the place, Josefina?" I asked. "It surely is," she said. La Gorda used to go to church all the time. She was a real churchgoer at that time. "Do you remember that house over there?" I asked, pointing to it. "That's Silvio Manuel's house," she said. All of us jumped upon hearing the name. I felt something similar to a mild shock of electric current going through my knees. The name was definitely not familiar to me, yet my body jumped upon hearing it. Silvio Manuel was such a rare name, so liquid a sound. The three Genros and Rosa were as perturbed as I was. I noticed that they were pale. Judging by what I felt, I must have been just as pale as they were. "Who is Silvio Manuel?" I finally managed to ask Josefina. "Now you got me," she said. "I don't know." She reiterated that she was crazy and nothing that she said should be taken seriously. Nestor begged her to tell us whatever she remembered. Josefina tried to think, but she was not the person to perform well under pressure. I knew that she would do better if no one asked her. I proposed that we look for a bakery or a place to eat. "They didn't let me do much in that house, that's what I remember," Josefina said all of a sudden. She turned around as if looking for something, or as if she were orienting herself. "Something is missing here," she exclaimed. "This is not quite the way it used to be." I attempted to help her by asking questions that I deemed appropriate, such as whether houses were missing or had been painted, or new ones built. But Josefina could not figure out how it was different. We walked to the bakery and bought sweet rolls. As we were heading back to the plaza to wait for La Gorda and Lydia, Josefina suddenly hit her forehead as if an idea had just struck her. "I know what's missing," she shouted. "That stupid wall of fog. It used to be here then. It's gone now." All of us spoke at once, asking her about the wall, but Josefina went on talking undisturbed, as if we were not there. "It was a wall of fog that went all the way up to the sky," she said. "It was right here. Every time I turned my head, there it was. It drove me crazy. That's right, damn it. I wasn't nuts until I was driven crazy by that wall. I saw it with my eyes closed or with my eyes open. I thought that wall was after me." For a moment Josefina lost her natural vivaciousness. A desperate look appeared in her eyes. I had seen that look in people who were going through a psychotic episode. I hurriedly suggested that she eat her sweet roll. She calmed down immediately and began to eat it. "What do you think of all this, Nestor?" I asked. "I'm scared," he said softly. "Do you remember anything?" I asked him. He shook his head negatively. I questioned Pablito and Benigno with a movement of my brows. They also shook their heads to say no. "How about you, Rosa?" I asked. Rosa jumped when she heard me addressing her. She seemed to have lost her speech. She held a sweet roll in her hand and stared at it, seemingly undecided as to what to do with it. "Of course she remembers," Josefina said, laughing, But she's frightened to death. Can't you see that piss is even coming out her ears? Josefina seemed to think her statement was the ultimate joke. She doubled up laughing and dropped her roll on the ground. She picked it up, dusted it off, and ate it. "Crazy people eat anything," she said, slapping me on the back. Nestor and Benigno seemed uncomfortable with Josefina's antics. Pablito was delighted. There was a look of admiration in his eyes. He shook his head and clicked his tongue as if he could not believe such grace. "Let's go to the house," Josefina urged us. "I'll tell you all kinds of things there." I said that we should wait for La Guarda and Lydia. Besides, it was still too early to bother the charming lady who lived there. Pablito said that in the course of his carpentry business he had been in the town and knew a house where a family prepared food for transient people. Josefina did not want to wait for her. It was either going to the house or going to eat. I opted for having breakfast and told Rosa to go into the church to get La Guarda and Lydia, but Benigno gallantly volunteered to wait for them and take them to the breakfast place. Apparently he too knew where the place was. Pablito did not take us directly there. Instead, at my request, we made a long detour. There was an old bridge at the edge of town that I wanted to examine. I had seen it from my car the day I had come with La Guarda. Its structure seemed to be colonial. We went out on the bridge and then stopped abruptly in the middle of it. I asked a man who was standing there if the bridge was very old. He said that he had seen it all his life and he was over 50. I thought that the bridge held a unique fascination for me alone, but watching the others, I had to conclude that they too had been affected by it. Nestor and Rosa were panting, out of breath. Pablito was holding on to Josefina, she in turn was holding on to me. "Do you remember anything, Josefina?" I asked. "That devil Silvio Manuel is on the other side of this bridge," she said, pointing to the other end, some 30 feet away. I looked Rosa in the eyes. She nodded her head affirmatively and whispered that she had once crossed that bridge in great fear and that something had been waiting to devour her at the other end. The two men were no help. They looked at me, bewildered. Each said that he was afraid for no reason. I had to agree with them. I felt I would not dare cross that bridge at night for all the money in the world. I did not know why. "What else do you remember, Josefina?" I asked. "My body is very frightened now," she said. "I can't remember anything else. That devil Silvio Manuel is always in the darkness. Ask Rosa." With a movement of my head, I invited Rosa to talk. She nodded affirmatively 3 or 4 times but could not vocalize her words. The tension I myself was experiencing was uncalled for, yet real. All of us were standing on that bridge, midway across, incapable of taking one more step in the direction Josefina had pointed. At last Josefina took the initiative and turned around. We walked back to the center of town. Pablito guided us then to a large house. La Guarda, Lydia, and Benigno were already eating, they had even ordered food for us. I was not hungry. Pablito, Nestor, and Rosa were in a daze. Josefina ate heartily. There was an ominous silence at the table. Everybody avoided my eyes when I tried to start a conversation. After breakfast we walked to the house. No one said a word. I knocked and when the lady came out I explained to her that I wanted to show her house to my friends. She hesitated for a moment. La Guarda gave her some money and apologized for inconveniencing her. Josefina led us directly to the back. I had not seen that part of the house when I was there before. There was a cobbled courtyard with rooms arranged around it. Bulky farming equipment was stored away in the roofed corridors. I had the feeling I had seen that courtyard when there was no clutter in it. There were 8 rooms, 2 on each of the 4 sides of the courtyard. Nestor, Pablito, and Benigno seemed to be on the brink of getting physically ill. La Guarda was perspiring profusely. She sat down with Josefina in an alcove in one of the walls, while Lydia and Rosa went inside one of the rooms. Suddenly Nestor seemed to have an urge to find something and disappeared into another of those rooms. So did Pablito and Benigno. I was left alone with the lady. I wanted to talk to her, ask her questions, see if she knew Silvio Manuel, but I could not muster the energy to talk. My stomach was in knots. My hands were dripping perspiration. What oppressed me was an intangible sadness, a longing for something not present, unformulated. I could not stand it. I was about to say goodbye to the lady and walk out of the house when La Gorda came to my side. She whispered that we should sit down in a large room off a hall separate from the courtyard. The room was visible from where we were standing. We went there and stepped inside. It was a very large, empty room with a high-beamed ceiling, dark but airy. La Gorda called everyone to the room. The lady just looked at us but did not come in herself. Everyone seemed to know precisely where to sit. The Genros sat to the right of the door, on one side of the room, and Lane Gorda and the three little sisters sat to the left, on the other side. They sat close to the walls. Although I would have liked to sit next to La Gorda, I sat near the center of the room. The place seemed right to me. I did not know why, but an ulterior order seemed to have determined our places. While I sat there, a wave of strange feelings rolled over me. I was passive and relaxed. I fancied myself to be like a moving picture screen on which alien feelings of sadness and longing were being projected. But there was nothing I could recognize as a precise memory. We stayed in that room for over an hour. Toward the end I felt I was about to uncover the source of the unearthly sadness that was making me weep almost without control. But then, as involuntarily as we had sat there, we stood up and left the house. We did not even thank the lady or say goodbye to her. We congregated in the plaza. La Gorda stated right away that because she was formless she was still in charge. She said that she was taking this stand because of conclusions she had reached in Silvio Manuel's house. La Gorda seemed to be waiting for comments. The silence of the others was unbearable to me. I finally had to say something. "What are the conclusions you reached in that house, Gorda?" I asked. "I think we all know what they are," she replied in a haughty tone. "We don't know that," I said. "Nobody has said anything yet." "We don't have to talk, we know," La Gorda said. I insisted that I could not take such an important event for granted. We needed to talk about our feelings. As far as I was concerned, all I had gotten out of it was a devastating sense of sadness and despair. "The Nagual Juan Matus was right," La Gorda said. "We had to sit on that place of power to be free. I am free now. I don't know how it happened but something was lifted off me as I sat there." The three women agreed with her. The three men did not. Nestor said that he had been about to remember actual faces, but that no matter how hard he had tried to clear his view, something thwarted him. All he had experienced was a sense of longing and sadness at finding himself still in the world. Pablito and Benigno said more or less the same thing. "See what I mean, Gorda?" I said. She seemed displeased. She puffed up as I had never seen her. Or had I seen her all puffed up before, somewhere? She harangued the group. I could not pay attention to what she was saying. I was immersed in a memory that was formless, but almost within my grasp. To keep it going it seemed I needed a continuous flow from La Gorda. I was fixed on the sound of her voice, her anger. At a certain moment, when she was becoming more subdued, I yelled at her that she was bossy. She got truly upset. I watched her for a while. I was remembering another Gorda, another time, an angry, fat Gorda, pounding her fists on my chest. I remembered laughing at seeing her angry, humoring her like a child. The memory ended the moment La Gorda's voice stopped. She seemed to have realized what I was doing. I addressed all of them and told them that we were in a precarious position, something unknown was looming over us. "It's not looming over us," La Gorda said dryly. "It's hit us already. And I think you know what it is." "I don't, and I think I'm also speaking for the rest of the men," I said. The three Genros assented with a nod. "We have lived in that house, while we were on the left side," La Gorda explained. I used to sit in that alcove to cry because I couldn't figure out what to do. I think if I could have stayed in that room a bit longer today, I would have remembered it all. But something pushed me out of there. I also used to sit in that room when there were more people in there. I couldn't remember their faces, though. Yet other things became clear as I sat there today. I'm formless. Things come to me, good and bad. I, for instance, picked up my old arrogance and my desire to brood. But I also picked up other things, good things. Me too, Lydia said in a raspy voice. What are the good things? I asked. I think I'm wrong in hating you, Lydia said. My hatred will keep me from flying away. They told me that in that room, the men there and the women. What men and what women? Nestor asked in a tone of fright. I was there when they were there, that's all I know, Lydia said. You also were there. All of us were there. Who were those men and women, Lydia? I asked. I was there when they were there, that's all I know, she repeated. How about you, Gorda? I asked. I've told you already that I can't remember any faces or anything specific, she said. But I know one thing, whatever we did in that house was on the left side. We crossed, or somebody made us cross, over the parallel lines. The weird memories we have come from that time, from that world. Without any verbal agreement, we left the plaza and headed for the bridge. LaGuardia and Lydia ran ahead of us. When we got there we found both of them standing exactly where we ourselves had stopped earlier. Silvio Manuel is the darkness, LaGuardia whispered to me, her eyes fixed on the other end of the bridge. Lydia was shaking. She also tried to talk to me. I could not understand what she was mouthing. I pulled everyone back away from the bridge. I thought that perhaps if we could piece together what we knew about that place, we might have a composite that would help us understand our dilemma. We sat on the ground a few yards away from the bridge. There were lots of people milling around but no one paid any attention to us. Who's Silvio Manuel, Gorda? I asked. I never heard the name until now, she said. I don't know the man, yet I know him. Something like waves came upon me when I heard that name. Josefina told me the name when we were in the house. From that moment on, things have started to come to my mind and to my mouth, just like Josefina. I never thought I would live to find myself being like Josefina. Why did you say that Silvio Manuel is the darkness? I asked. I have no idea, she said. Yet all of us here know that that is the truth. She urged the women to speak up. No one uttered a word. I picked on Rosa. She had been about to say something 3 or 4 times. I accused her of holding out on us. Her little body convulsed. We crossed this bridge and Silvio Manuel waited for us at the other end, she said in a voice barely audible. I went last. When he devoured the others I heard their screams. I wanted to run away but the devil Silvio Manuel was at both ends of the bridge. There was no way to escape. LaGuardia, Lydia, and Josefina agreed. I asked whether it was just a feeling that they had had or an actual moment-to-moment memory of something. LaGuardia said that for her it had been exactly as Rosa had described it, a moment-to-moment memory. The other two agreed with her. I wondered aloud what had happened with the people who lived around the bridge. If the women were screaming as Rosa said they were, the passers-by must have heard them. Screaming would have caused a commotion. For a moment I felt that the whole town must have collaborated in some plot. A chill ran through me. I turned to Nestor and bluntly expressed the full scope of my fear. Nestor said that the Nagual Juan Matus and Gennaro were indeed warriors of supreme accomplishment and as such they were solitary beings. Their contacts with people were one-to-one. There was no possibility that the entire town or even the people who lived around the bridge were in collusion with them. For that to happen, Nestor said, all those people would have to be warriors, a most unlikely possibility. Josefina began to circle me, looking me up and down with a sneer. You certainly have gall, she said. Pretending that you don't know anything, when you were here yourself. You brought us here. You pushed us onto this bridge. The eyes of the women became menacing. I turned to Nestor for assistance. I don't remember a thing, he said. This place scares me, that's all I know. Turning to Nestor was an excellent maneuver on my part. The women lashed out at him. Of course you remember. Josefina yelled. All of us were here. What kind of stupid ass are you? My inquiry required a sense of order. I moved them away from the bridge. I thought that, being the active persons they were, they would find it more relaxing to stroll and talk things out, rather than sitting, as I would have preferred. As we walked, the women's anger vanished as quickly as it had come. Lydia and Josefina became even more talkative. They stated over and over the sense they had had that Silvio Manuel was awesome. Nevertheless, neither of them could remember being physically hurt, they only remembered being paralyzed by fear. Rosa did not say a word, but gestured her agreement with everything the others said. I asked them if it had been night when they tried to cross the bridge. Both Lydia and Josefina said that it was daytime. Rosa cleared her throat and whispered that it was at night. La Gorda clarified the discrepancy, explaining that it had been the morning twilight, or just before. We reached the end of the short street and automatically turned back toward the bridge. Its simplicity itself, La Gorda said suddenly, as if she had just thought it through. We were crossing, or rather Silvio Manuel was making us cross, the parallel lines. That bridge is a power spot, a hole in this world, a door to the other. We went through it. It must have hurt us to go through, because my body is scared. Silvio Manuel was waiting for us on the other side. None of us remembers his face, because Silvio Manuel is the darkness and never would he show his face. We could see only his eyes. One eye, Rosa said quietly, and looked away. Everyone here, including you, La Gorda said to me, knows that Silvio Manuel's face is in darkness. One could only hear his voice, soft, like muffled coughing. La Gorda stopped talking and began scrutinizing me in a way that made me feel self-conscious. Her eyes were cagey, she gave me the impression that she was holding back something she knew. I asked her. She denied it, but she admitted having scores of feelings with no foundation that she did not care to explain. I urged and then demanded that the women make an effort to recollect what had happened to them on the other side of that bridge. Each of them could remember only hearing the screams of the others. The three generals remained outside our discussion. I asked Nestor if he had any idea of what had happened. His somber answer was that all of it was beyond his understanding. I came then to a quick decision. It seemed to me that the only avenue open for us was to cross that bridge. I rallied them to walk back to the bridge and go over it as a group. The men agreed instantaneously, the women did not. After exhausting all my reasonings, I finally had to push and drag Lydia, Rosa, and Josefina. La Gorda was reluctant to go but seemed intrigued by the prospect. She moved along without helping me with the women, and so did the generals. They giggled nervously at my efforts to herd the little sisters, but they did not move a finger to help. We walked up to the point where we had stopped earlier. I felt there that I was suddenly too weak to hold the three women. I yelled at La Gorda to help. She made a half-hearted attempt to catch Lydia as the group lost its cohesion and every one of them except La Gorda scrambled, stumping and puffing, to the safety of the street. La Gorda and I stayed as if we were glued to that bridge, incapable of going forward and begrudging having to retreat. La Gorda whispered in my ear that I should not be afraid at all because it had actually been I who had been waiting for them on the other side. She added that she was convinced I knew I was Silvio Manuel's helper but that I did not dare to reveal it to anyone. Right then a fury beyond my control shook my body. I felt that La Gorda had no business making those remarks or having those feelings. I grabbed her by the hair and twirled her around. I caught myself at the apex of my wrath and stopped. I apologized and hugged her. A sober thought came to my rescue. I said to her that being a leader was getting on my nerves, the tension was becoming more and more acute as we proceeded. She did not agree with me. She held on steadfastly to her interpretation that Silvio Manuel and I were utterly close, and that upon being reminded of my master I had reacted with anger. It was lucky that she had been entrusted to my care, she said, otherwise I probably would have thrown her off the bridge. We turned back. The rest of them were safely off the bridge, staring at us with unmistakable fear. A very peculiar state of timelessness seemed to prevail. There were no people around. We must have been on that bridge for at least 5 minutes and not a single person had crossed it or even come in sight. Then all of a sudden people were moving around as on any thoroughfare during the busy hours. Without a word, we walked back to the plaza. We were dangerously weak. I had a vague desire to remain in the town a bit longer, but we got in the car and drove east, toward the Atlantic coast. Nestor and I took turns driving, stopping only for gasoline and to eat, until we reached Veracruz. That city was neutral ground for us. I had been there only once, none of the others had ever been there. La Gorda believed that such an unknown city was the proper place to shed their old rap kings. We checked into a hotel and there they proceeded to rip their old clothes to shreds. The excitation of a new city did wonders for their morale and their feeling of well-being. Our next stop was Mexico City. We stayed at a hotel by the Alameda Park where Don Juan and I had once stayed. For 2 days we were perfect tourists. We shopped and visited as many tourist spots as possible. The women looked simply stunning. Benigno bought a camera in a pawn shop. He took 425 shots without any film. At one place, while we were admiring the stupendous mosaics on the walls, a security guard asked me where those gorgeous foreign women were from. He assumed I was a tourist guide. I told him that they were from Sri Lanka. He believed me and marveled at the fact that they almost looked Mexican. The following day at 10 o'clock in the morning we were at the airline office into which Don Juan had once pushed me. When he shoved me I had gone in through one door and come out through another, not to the street, as I should have, but to a market at least a mile away, where I had watched the activities of the people there. La Gorda speculated that the airline office was also, like that bridge, a power spot, a door to cross from one parallel line to the other. She said that evidently the Nagual had pushed me through that opening but I got caught midway between the two worlds, in between the lines, thus I had watched the activity in the market without being part of it. She said that the Nagual, of course, had intended to push me all the way through, but my willfulness thwarted him and I ended back on the line I came from, this world. We walked from the airline office to the market and from there to the Alameda Park, where Don Juan and I had sat after our experience at the office. I had been in that park with Don Juan many times. I felt it was the most appropriate place to talk about the course of our future actions. It was my intention to summarize everything we had done in order to let the power of that place decide what our next step would be. After our deliberate attempt at crossing the bridge, I had tried unsuccessfully to think out a way to handle my companions as a group. We sat on some stone steps and I started off with the idea that for me knowledge was fused with words. I told them that it was my earnest belief that if an event or experience was not formulated into a concept, it was condemned to dissipate. I asked them therefore to give me their individual assessments of our situation. Pablito was the first one to talk. I found that odd, since he had been extraordinarily quiet up until now. He apologized because what he was going to say was not something he had remembered or felt but a conclusion based on everything he knew. He said that he saw no problem in understanding what the women said had happened on that bridge. It had been, Pablito maintained, a matter of being compelled to cross from the right side, the tonal, to the left side, the Nagual. What had scared everyone was the fact that someone else was in control, forcing the crossing. He saw no problem either in accepting that I had been the one who had then helped Silvio Manuel. He backed up his conclusion with the statement that only 2 days earlier he had seen me doing the same thing, pushing everyone onto the bridge. That time I had had no one to help me on the other side, no Silvio Manuel to pull them. I tried to change the topic and began to explain to them that to forget the way we had forgotten was called amnesia. The little I knew about amnesia was not enough to shed any light on our case, but enough to make me believe that we could not forget as if on command. I told them that someone, possibly Don Juan, must have done something unfathomable to us. I wanted to find out exactly what that had been. Pablito insisted that it was important for me to understand that it was I who had been in cahoots with Silvio Manuel. He intimated then that Lydia and Josefia had talked to him about the role I had played in forcing them to cross the parallel lines. I did not feel comfortable discussing that subject. I commented that I had never heard about the parallel lines until the day I spoke with Donna Soledad, yet I had had no qualms about immediately adopting the idea. I told them that I knew in a flash what she meant. I even became convinced I had crossed them myself when I thought I remembered her. Every one of the others, with the exception of La Gorda, said that the first time they had heard about parallel lines was when I spoke of them. La Gorda said that she had first learned about them from Donna Soledad, just before I did. Pablito made an attempt to talk about my relationship with Silvio Manuel. I interrupted him. I said that while all of us were at the bridge trying to cross it, I had failed to recognize that I, and presumably all of them, had entered into a state of non-ordinary reality. I only became aware of the change when I realized that there were no other people on the bridge. Only the 8 of us had stood there. It had been a clear day, but suddenly the skies became cloudy and the light of the mid-morning turned to dusk. I had been so busy with my fears and personalistic interpretations then that I had failed to notice the awesome change. When we retreated from the bridge I perceived that other people were again walking around. But what had happened to them when we were attempting our crossing? La Gorda and the rest of them had not noticed anything. In fact, they had not been aware of any changes until the very moment I described them. All of them stared at me with a mixture of annoyance and fear. Pablito again took the lead and accused me of trying to railroad them into something they did not want. He was not specific about what that might be, but his eloquence was enough to rally the others behind him. Suddenly I had a horde of angry sorcerers on me. It took me a long time to explain my need to examine from every possible point of view something so strange and engulfing as our experience on the bridge. They finally calmed down, not so much because they were convinced, but from emotional fatigue. All of them, La Gorda included, had vehemently supported Pablito's stand. Nestor advanced another line of reasoning. He suggested that I was possibly an unwilling envoy who did not fully realize the scope of my actions. He added that he could not bring himself to believe, as the others did, that I was aware that I had been left with the task of misleading them. He felt that I did not really know that I was leading them to their destruction, yet I was doing just that. He thought that there were 2 ways of crossing the parallel lines, one by means of someone else's power, and the other by one's own power. His final conclusion was that Silvio Manuel had made them cross by frightening them so intensely that some of them did not even remember having done it. The task left for them to accomplish was to cross on their own power, mine was to thwart them. Benigno spoke then. He said that in his opinion the last thing Don Juan did to the male apprentices was to help us cross the parallel lines by making us jump into an abyss. Benigno believed that we already had a great deal of knowledge about the crossing but that it was not yet time to accomplish it again. At the bridge they were incapable of taking one more step because the time was not right. They were correct, therefore, in believing that I had tried to destroy them by forcing them to cross. He thought that going over the parallel lines in full awareness meant a final step for all of them, a step to be taken only when they were ready to disappear from this earth. Lydia faced me next. She did not make any assessments but challenged me to remember how I had first lured her to the bridge. She blatantly stated that I was not the Nagual Juan Matis's apprentice but Silvio Manuel's, that Silvio Manuel and I had devoured each other's bodies. I had another attack of rage, as with La Gorda on the bridge. I caught myself in time. A logical thought calmed me. I said to myself over and over that I was interested in analyses. I explained to Lydia that it was useless to taunt me like that. She did not want to stop. She yelled that Silvio Manuel was my master and that this was the reason I was not part of them at all. Rosa added that Silvio Manuel gave me everything I was. I questioned Rosa's choice of words. I told her that she should have said that Silvio Manuel gave me everything I had. She defended her wording. Silvio Manuel had given me what I was. Even La Gorda backed her up and said that she remembered a time when I had gotten so ill that I had no resources left, everything in me was exhausted. It was then that Silvio Manuel had taken over and pumped new life into my body. La Gorda said that I was indeed better off knowing my true origins than proceeding, as I had done so far, on the assumption that it was the Nagual Juan Matus who had helped me. She insisted that I was fixed on the Nagual because of his predilection for words. Silvio Manuel, on the other hand, was the silent darkness. She explained that in order to follow him I would need to cross the parallel lines. But to follow the Nagual Juan Matus, all I needed to do was to talk about him. What they were saying was nothing but nonsense to me. I was about to make what I thought was a very good point about it when my line of reasoning became literally scrambled. I could not think what my point had been, although only a second before, it was clarity itself. Instead, a most curious memory beset me. It was not a feeling of something, but the actual hard memory of an event. I remembered that once I was with Don Juan and another man whose face I could not remember. The three of us were talking about something I was perceiving as a feature of the world. It was 3 or 4 yards to my right and it was an inconceivable bank of yellowish fog that, as far as I could tell, divided the world in two. It went from the ground up to the sky, to infinity. While I talked to the two men, the half of the world to my left was intact and the half to my right was veiled in fog. I remembered that I had oriented myself with the aid of landmarks and realized that the axis of the bank of fog went from east to west. Everything to the north of that line was the world as I knew it. I remembered asking Don Juan what had happened to the world south of the line. Don Juan made me turn a few degrees to my right, and I saw that the wall of fog moved as I turned my head. The world was divided in two at a level my intellect could not comprehend. The division seemed real, but the boundary was not on a physical plane, it had to be somehow in myself. Or was it? There was still one more facet to this memory. The other man said that it was a great accomplishment to divide the world in two, but it was an even greater accomplishment when a warrior had the serenity and control to stop the rotation of that wall. He said that the wall was not inside us, it was certainly out in the world, dividing it in two, and rotating when we moved our heads, as if it were stuck to our right temples. The great accomplishment of keeping the wall from turning enabled the warrior to face the wall and gave him the power to go through it any time he so desired. When I told the apprentices what I had just remembered, the women were convinced that the other man was Silvio Manuel. Josefina, as a connoisseur of the wall of fog, explained that the advantage Attilio had over everyone else was his capacity to make the wall stand still so he could go through it at will. She added that it is easier to pierce the wall of fog in dreaming because then it does not move. La Gorda seemed to be touched by a series of perhaps painful memories. Her body jumped involuntarily until finally she exploded into words. She said that it was no longer possible for her to deny the fact that I was Silvio Manuel's helper. The Nagual himself had warned her that I would enslave her if she was not careful. Even Soledad had told her to watch me because my spirit took prisoners and kept them as servants, a thing only Silvio Manuel would do. He had enslaved me and I in turn would enslave anyone who came close to me. She asserted that she had lived under my spell up to the moment she sat in that room in Silvio Manuel's house, when something was suddenly lifted off her shoulders. I stood up and literally staggered under the impact of La Gorda's words. There was a vacuum in my stomach. I had been convinced that I could count on her for support under any conditions. I felt betrayed. I thought it would be appropriate to let them know my feelings, but a sense of sobriety came to my rescue. I told them instead that it had been my dispassionate conclusion, as a warrior, That Don Juan had changed the course of my life for the better. I had assessed over and over what he had done to me, and the conclusion had always been the same. He had brought me freedom. Freedom was all I knew, all I could bring to anyone who might come to me. Nestor made a gesture of solidarity with me. He exhorted the women to abandon their animosity toward me. He looked at me with the eyes of one who does not understand but wants to. He said that I did not belong with them, that I was indeed a solitary bird. They had needed me for a moment in order to break their boundaries of affection and routine. Now that they were free, the sky was their limit. To remain with me would doubtlessly be pleasant but deadly for them. He seemed to be deeply moved. He came to my side and put his hand on my shoulder. He said that he had the feeling we were not going to see each other ever again on this earth. He regretted that we were going to part like petty people, bickering, complaining, accusing. He told me that speaking on behalf of the others, but not for himself, he was going to ask me to leave, for we had no more possibilities in being together. He added that he had laughed at LaGuardia for telling us about the snake we had formed. He had changed his mind and no longer found the idea ridiculous. It had been our last opportunity to succeed as a group. Don Juan had taught me to accept my fate in humbleness. The course of a warrior's destiny is unalterable, he once said to me. The challenge is how far he can go within those rigid bounds, how impeccable he can be within those rigid bounds. If there are obstacles in his path, the warrior strives impeccably to overcome them. If he finds unbearable hardship and pain on his path, he weeps, but all his tears put together could not move the line of his destiny the breadth of one hair. My original decision to let the power of that place point out our next step had been correct. I stood up. The others turned their heads away. LaGuardia came to my side and said, as if nothing had happened, that I should leave and that she would catch up with me and join me at a later time. I wanted to retort that I saw no reason for her to join me. She had chosen to join the others. She seemed to read my feeling of having been betrayed. She calmly assured me that we had to fulfill our fate together as warriors and not as the petty people we were.